is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. As our world becomes more secular, what is the role of the church? That's what we're going to talk about today. We have with us someone who has written a new book on spiritual reflections on faith, family, values, and culture. Happy to have with us Clay Stauffer from Woodmont Christian Church. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ben, for having me back.
So here's the book, Spiritual Reflections on Faith, Values, and Culture. You've just written this. It's out now. What was your goal here? Why did you write the book?
So I've had the chance for a number of years now to write a regular column for the Tennessean on Saturdays in the Faith and Values section. And those articles have focused on issues of Christianity, faith, spirituality, values, relationships, how we get over difficult times in life. And so I have some of those collected over the years, and I took a number of those and then added some new material and decided to publish it as a book. And it just came out this month.
And this is a book, you don't have to read it all at once. You can kind of pick and choose different areas, right? You've divided it up into different sections.
That's right.
And so how is it divided?
So there's 6 basic sections. The first section is called Wisdom for Living. The second section is on values that we hold as important. The third is on the Christian life. What does it mean to be a Christian, to be a follower of Christ? The fourth section is on spirituality, because we live in an age where a lot of people say that they're spiritual but not religious. The fifth section is politics and American culture, and then at the last section I opine on some current events that have happened in recent years. And
yes, you've written for the Tennessean. We've had you on before because you've written articles about various things as far as our culture and religion. I believe we had you on a few years ago when you talked about the role of the church. So many churches are struggling just to get people in the door, and we're becoming more and more secular. What do we do about that? As I ask off the top, as we become more secular, our culture, what should the role of the church be, and how does the church address it?
There's a phrase that I've used a lot called rapid secularization, and I think that it's happening. We see it happening all over the place, and you're right. There are churches that are struggling to get people to come to worship. They're struggling to get them to show up. The new data says that if somebody goes to church once a month, they consider themselves to be churched, which is fine, except for if you're a preacher, you don't want to hear that. But we are living in a more secular age, a more secular world, which has created lots of challenges for those of us who serve churches and who want the Christian faith. And I would say the same thing for rabbis and for imams, that they want faith and spirituality to be a central focal part of their parishioners' lives. But if they don't see them very often, then that is sending a message. And so it has gotten more challenging. But I still believe, Ben, that people are hungry with the same questions. They're looking for meaning. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for authentic relationships and a way to find meaning in this world that often seems chaotic.
And you talk in here about we live in an age of anxiety where fear abounds and overwhelms many. You do hear that over and over. There's so much anxiety. There's so much fear. Why do you think that is, and again, what can the church do?
Well, people often ask, is there really more fear and anxiety than there was before? I would say yes, and largely because the digital age is driving that. We are on all the time. We are able to get text messages and emails at any given time, and so I think people are always kind of on edge because they don't ever know when they're going to be contacted. And then the news, everything is breaking news. You know, at what point is everything can't be breaking news, but everything is breaking news.
I would agree with that.
People leave with they just live their lives every day, almost like expecting something bad to happen, and that's kind of the definition of anxiety. Anxiety is fear of the unknown. Fear, you can name what you're afraid of. I'm afraid of heights. I'm afraid of public speaking. I'm afraid of getting sick. But anxiety is I'm afraid, but I'm not sure what I'm afraid of. And there's a lot of that in our culture.
And so how does the church address that? If people are always on edge and always feel like they're on, how can the church help solve that problem? Because there might be some who just want to retreat and go, okay, I'm just going to stay and worship under a tree, do my own thing.
Well, a couple of thoughts. First, I believe that one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century is going to continue to be social isolation. There's a guy at Harvard named Robert Putnam, wrote a book back in 2000 called Bowling Alone, and since then there's been a number of books talking about the fragmentation of our society, how people don't interact the way that they used to. So I believe that the church gives people an opportunity to come together in authentic community to do what you and I are doing right now, to talk face to face. And guess what? That's different from being on your phone. Social media is deceptive. People think that they're connecting with their 500 friends, but it's not a substitute for authentic relationships. It's a supplement, but it's not a substitute. So I think, first of all, the church gives people a place to belong and to be a part of a community. But secondly, I think that a big part of our faith is learning what it means to grow in our spiritual lives, which means that we have to take the time to pray, take the time to be still, take the time to not always be in a hurry, not always overcommit. And that's becoming a really big problem in our culture, where people stay so busy all the time so that they don't have to stop and think about their lives or reflect. And
you pastor, it's Woodmont Christian Church. It's the beautiful church there on Hillsborough Road with the big white steeple. And there are a lot of people that go there. I've been going there. It's got a large congregation. But as we said, so many churches are having trouble getting people to come in the door. And so it then begs that question of where are we headed? What sort of world, what sort of culture will our children inherit? And what role will church play in the future? What do you see there?
Well, it's been great to look out, see you and your family out there. I think that the church it's going to be a challenging time for the church, but I think people are looking for the things that we just talked about, but also they want a message that is, biblically grounded, but also relevant to their lives. That people are struggling every day to raise their kids. They're struggling to pay the bills. They're struggling to just to keep their marriage alive and to keep hope alive in some situations. People are depressed. Suicide rates are higher because of some of this isolation that we're talking about. So I think the church has got to be a place that gives people hope and that helps them live their lives from day to day. Yes, Jesus Christ continues to speak to our culture, but some churches are better than others at making that message relevant to the 21st century. And so I hope as a minister that I can do that, and that the other folks on our staff can do that. But I believe that the church has a very important role to play, but it has to understand the culture that we are in is not the same as it was back in the 1960s, where the church would just open its doors and everybody would come. That's not the case anymore.
And what do churches need to ask of people? Do you think sometimes churches are afraid to ask too much because people are so busy? Or do churches sometimes ask too much and then push people away? Kind of what is that sweet spot?
Well, there is such a thing as religious busyness. People can be so busy, going to worship, going to a small group, going to Sunday school, all those things, that they're just so busy doing religious things, but they don't ask the question, am I really growing in my faith? Am I really growing in my spiritual life? And so I think churches need to help people find that balance. I think people are looking to worship. I think they're looking to connect, and they're looking to grow and serve. They want to serve and give back in the community. And churches that can offer ways for people to do that are going to do well as we continue looking ahead in the 21st century.
So one of the areas in here you talked about is about politics, right? And that just is a tough topic. So that just sows all kinds of anxiety and tension. What are you saying in here, I guess? And how should churches respond to this very divided situation that we find ourselves in now?
Yeah, I think all Republicans and Democrats would agree that the era of Donald Trump is a brave new world. And there is a lot of polarization. You see it in families, you see it in friendships. A lot of people just avoid it because they don't want to talk about it. I just got back, I told you last night, from a conference in Florida where we were, as a group of ministers, and we were talking about how do we get the church to be different from the culture, where we see that the world is polarized, but this is a place where we can come and love each other and respect differences of opinion and actually have the civil dialogue and discourse that's not happening out in the world. And so I think churches, if they're doing it right, can be havens for that. You see, last time I was on your show, we talked about the polarization that's also happening in churches, where you have liberal churches and conservative churches. I serve a big tent church where we have Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, and we like it that way because we think that that's real. And so what the church can and should model is what civility and mutual respect and dialogue looks like in an age that is now marked by polarization and demonizing the other side.
And are churches prepared to do that? That's going to be tough. It's tough in the media. It's tough anywhere to be that way. And how can churches be prepared to do that? And are they prepared to do that?
Well, I would say some churches are and some aren't. And some ministers are and some aren't. We have to be okay with the fact that not everybody is going to see the world and see the issues the same way that we do. But when you're Christian, you also have to look at the life and teachings of Jesus Christ and say, well, how would Christ want us to see these issues? And then Christians even disagree on what they think about that. So I would say that some churches are poised for that and some ministers are poised for that and others aren't. But I do think as we continue to live in this polarized culture, that's going to become more and more necessary just because of the fracturing that's going on in people's lives.
All right, we're going to take a break. Then we're going to come back and talk. We'll go through some of the other chapters in here and get some of the other stories. We'll take a break, come back, continue our discussion. Be back right after this.